You got some Meacham heads in the audience.
Usually I get that reaction at assisted living facilities. Right between Murder, She Wrote and Jeopardy.
Oh, you're right in the middle there.
They put right in there, exactly.
That's a good run. That's a good grouping
to be in. It's a good place to be.
Well, thank you for being here on such a celebratory week. So exciting. So many things. You were once an advisor for Joe Biden. You've written books about Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson. You're writing one now on Eisenhower. What inspired you to want to write so extensively about the U.S. presidency? See, for me, I'm intrigued, but I have a hard time because there just isn't a female lead that I can connect to.
Yeah, I mean? It's very, and we've now proven we'll send anybody to the White House.
Yes, that is true.
Not just once, we proved it twice.
2 times.
Very impressive. So the presidency is, as President Kennedy once said, the vital center of action. It's where the life of the nation is most dramatically manifested, both for good and for ill. Who knew for ill would be quite so formidable in this era? And so the human drama with the larger story of the populace, of power, to me is the most fascinating story you can possibly have. What I think about, the people I've written about have been flawed, imperfect people, fallible people who just at the last possible moment managed to bend the arc of history in the right direction. And they just got it right 51% of the time. These are not 60-40 people. These are not 80-20 people necessarily. These are 51-49. And I think that should give us some hope for democracy itself, because a democracy is the fullest expression of all of us. And I'm sure you're a better person than I am. That's not hard. Don't get cocky.
Doubt that. Doubt that.
But
did you see my first act?
Well,
Doubt
I was going to mention that. Yeah. But I think that if we get things right just enough of the time in our own lives, which most of us do, you know, I get things wrong a lot. But when I get something right, okay. So that's what democracy is, because it's the fullest expression of all of us.
Do you think President Trump will get it right in the 11th hour?
One lives in hope.
So strong pause there.
There was a long pause. Look, I think the best thing that's happened in these 100 days is the evidence of the public reaction to what's unfolding. And the numbers are not great. And so it may just be that, as Winston Churchill once said, you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing once they've exhausted every other possibility.
Boy, have we ever.
Exactly.
From a historical standpoint, what is the significance of the first 100 days? Is it really that meaningful, or is it just a Hallmark holiday for the media?
Well, Doris Goodwin and I have we do action figures for it. It's very exciting. That was funny.
I'd buy one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We'll sell them on the web. We'll put them up on the web later, on the website, if that's still up.
It started out as a great undertaking. It was Franklin Roosevelt in the winter of 1933, 25% unemployment, a serious question about whether American democracy would survive, whether democratic capitalism could survive. You had totalitarianism taking root in Berlin, in Rome, in Moscow. Huge question about whether democracy would work and endure here. FDR, the night he became president, the first of the 100 days, is having a glass of whiskey and going to bed, like we all should do. And an aide comes to him and says, kind of pretentiously when you think about it, said, "Mr. President, if you solve the crisis of the Depression, you'll go down as our greatest president. But if you fail, you'll go down as our worst." And FDR looked at him and said, "If I fail, I'll go down as our last." He understood the stakes of the hour.
Wow.
And so in those 100 days, he did everything he could, just threw everything at the wall, trying to get the first New Deal passed. And, you know, the 1930s and 40s, we live in the long shadow of that. It redefined the relationship of the government to the people, not just the New Deal, but the Second World War. We had federal spending was something like 3.9% of GDP in 1941. It was 30% during the war. It went back down to about 22% in our most prosperous years in the 1950s. And so I know we all want to think that it's just the private sector and it's just individual initiative and we're all Horatio Alger. You know what? The government has a lot to do with this. The public sector has a lot to do with this. And to cut mindlessly is just mindless.
Yeah. You talk about after January 6th, your biggest regret about Trump.
Yeah.
President Trump, I guess I should say, to be respectful.
We should. You know why? Because there was this creature.
Sell me on it.
I will. Here. This is actually a WASP point. Those are the kind I make. So there was this creature in America for 4 years in right-wing media named Biden.
Yes.
Right? Biden was doing this and Biden was doing that. Well, you know what? He was the president of the United States. And so let's give him the title on the hope that perhaps the beginning, with a little civility, might hearken some sanity. It's a small hope.
Okay, I'm with you on that. One of your biggest regrets about President Trump is that you thought that he was a difference of degree and not kind.
Right.
We're now 100 days into his second term. How do you see him now?
Right. So for the first 4 years, basically, from 2015 until after the 2020 election. So not just January 6th, but the call to Georgia, the fake electors, the attempt to overturn an election. That, and this is against my business model, when I say something is unprecedented, that doesn't help me as a historian. But this was unprecedented. No American president had ever done this. Andrew Jackson had lost a much closer election. He hashtagged it. He called it a corrupt bargain, but he went back home to Nashville and just ran again. Nobody stormed the Capitol. Nobody did this. And so that was a difference of kind. And I didn't think the American people would do this again. I didn't think 49.9% would do it again. But you can't be for democracy only when you win. And so the question now is we're all facing this extraordinary test of citizenship. And he is, I think, knocking down a lot of the barriers, a lot of the guardrails, a lot of the institutions that are flawed and imperfect, like all of us, but which have, in fact, served us well enough to still have a system that's worth defending. And so again, these polls suggest that people are not thrilled about chaos that at least is economically painful.
Right.
And that's a really important thing here, right? Is politicians all act on incentive. Lincoln said that. All men act on incentive. And so people talk themselves into thinking in the 2024 election that President Trump would represent prosperity. Well, you know. My favorite headline of the week was Trump has planned to work around tariffs for car makers.
What does that mean?
Well, what did outer space? The tariff aliens came,
yes.
And we're going to stand up against these evil tariffs. It was like, you know. Cognitive dissonance is an American characteristic, but we don't have to go quite that bad.
Right, I hope not. There has certainly been a lot of just him acting out, doing whatever he wants, flooding the courts, finding loopholes. Do you think in a way that this could act as a blueprint for Democrats moving forward?
Well, I hope not.
Yeah.
Because...
You're right, that was a bad thought, bad suggestion. Shame on me.
Okay, all right, it's
I'm
good.
officially not a better person than you.
That's okay. Well, you're from Kentucky.
Touche.
Yeah, says the Tennessean.
Yeah.
No, I think, here's what I do think is happening. I think that, and I was not a great math student, so when a pendulum goes this far, right, when it drops back, it doesn't go back to the middle. It keeps going. So you don't have, President Trump is not a recipe for us to have a president from the Brookings Institution next time. Right, for some sort of moderate, we're all going to reason together. The pendulum will probably move pretty far that way. And I think, I never thought I would say this, but the longer President Trump governs the way he's governing, the more likely he's making the presidency of AOC. I really do. And as the right wing gets their chyrons ready about that, that's simply it's a historical point about when you push too far, there's always a reaction.
Right. So it does feel like there is a moment of populism. So also with the popularity of Bernie and AOC. So you think that's an actual possibility?
Sure.
You think it's likely?
Sure. I don't think it's likely, but I don't know if it's likely. But we live in a world where Donald Trump's been president twice. What's likely?
How can you even predict?
This is a post-Cartesian world.
Do you feel like the checks and balances and the guardrails that have been woven into our democracy will hold on, or are we going to need a bigger guardrail?
Well, here's the thing. It's actually, and I used the image I shouldn't have, it's not an inanimate image. To call it a guardrail actually suggests that there's some non-human force that's going to save us. Mm-hmm. Institutions are human. So when we say the courts, we should really say judges, right?
Yes.
When we say Congress, we should say Congress, people, and senators. It's when we say universities, it's university presidents and boards, right? It's us. And we are going to get what we deserve. And that's a terrifying thought in many ways. But I do think what Harvard did recently is really important, because fear is a really good starter for demagogues. It's hard, it's not a great finisher. Mm-hmm. It's hard to keep a lot of people afraid for a really, really long time. But to fight fear, you need courage. And courage is one of the most contagious things you can imagine.
We're definitely seeing cracks in the media ecosystem right now in terms of how they're covering the administration, the pressure, the aggression towards media in general. What would you like to see more from the media at large in terms of covering this administration?
I think we're all the media now. This is another question of terminology. There's the press, and then there's the media.
Right.
And anybody with a cell phone actually can now reach far more people than Cronkite ever thought about reaching. Right? I mean, it's just anyone.
Yeah.
So the notion of a gatekeeper, I think, is pretty much gone, to state the obvious. I think that the more you can say, the more you can just actually stand up for truth and just facts, I think is the best thing to do.
Remember those.
I know. They're sweet. They were sweet. They were sweet. They were a little cute. They were fuzzy.
They're so adorable back then.
They really
those
were.
Those were the good old days.
They were little tiny facts. And so just say, and the notion, this is one of the more troubling things that's happened in the last decade or so, is the notion that facts are partisan.
Right.
That, I mean, the moment when the the incumbent vice president said, well, we weren't going to do any fact checking. Remember during the debate, one of the moderators tried to say something. He said, we're not going to do, as if, okay, we're just suspending reality now, you know?
Right.
You know? And so I think investing as many resources as possible on saying, this is accurate, this is not. 2 + 2 = 4. And just because President Trump says is equals.
You're better at math than you said you were. Good job.
I was sort of being a little modest. I just here's what's discernible, here's what's not. And when you can manipulate that, which is part of the era we're living in, then you're moving from a reality-based universe into a full-on reality show. But unfortunately, that reality show becomes our reality,
Yeah. As a revered historian.
Revered.
Revered.
It's like being the best restaurant in a hospital.
Do you think that we will look back on this time differently than the way that we're experiencing it right now?
It depends on how it turns out. If this is seasonal, then we will look at it as a case study in how the legitimate cares and concerns of a lot of people were manipulated and marshaled by someone who did not actually have their cares and concerns at heart. And it will be an example of how American democracy can veer out of a lane of reality-based, rule-based order. If this is chronic, then it will be a great battle to tell the truth about this and to bear witness to, no, this is what is true. Just because someone who got more votes than the other guy says that something is true does not make it so.
That's the truth. I sure hope that we veer right out of this. And I appreciate you being here to help process this moment in time. You are a grounding force and give us a little optimism for the future.
Well, what's the alternative, right? I mean, we didn't, as John Belushi said, we did not give up when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor.
I'm going to end it right there.